that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. Tom is unfortunately out today. He has a minor medical problem, fortunately minor, or at least so I have heard. I will miss him, and I assume that many people watching will too. Every day I get up in the morning early and I do research, searching the internet for articles that have come up usually in the last 24 hours on energy and climate change. I assemble these about 50 words for a synopsis of each, and then a link to the original article. And I put 10 or 15 of these together and post them at a blog that's posted daily called geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. I will try in the course of this program, which gives the 20 or so items that I think are the most interesting from the last week. I'll try to make sure that you understand what date they came up on, so that you can go to the blog and read more on the article if you wish. Today's program is recorded on the 16th of March, and that means that we start a week ago today on the 9th of March. And we start with an item from Bloomberg, which I've got to get up a picture on a screen here. This is a wind turbine at Block Island. The article from Bloomberg, however, is from Europe. Across Europe, the price of building an offshore wind farm has fallen 46% in the last 5 years, 22% in the last year alone. Costs now average $126 per megawatt hour, according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. That is below the $155 per megawatt hour price for new nuclear developments in Europe, and is closing in on an $88 per megawatt hour price tag on new coal plants. The price of $126 per megawatt hour does not sound like it's all that close to 88, but having fallen 46% in the last 5 years, and 22% in the last year, if it continues to fall at the rate that it fell last year, it will be below $88 per megawatt hour, and beating the average price of new coal plants within 18 months. And even if it continues to fall at the rate that it fell in the last 5 years, it will reach that same price or lower within 3 years. So it is actually closing in on it. And the improvements that are happening in wind farm technology are making a huge difference. One of the things that came up in the last week was an improvement in the maintenance for offshore wind. These turbines have to be maintained on a regular basis, but it turns out that it can be done by robots. And so that is a great deal cheaper than sending human people out to climb those turbines and do maintenance on them. Our next item is from The Guardian. According to the energy market analysis firm Reputex, clean coal technologies will not be available commercially viable before 2030 without government subsidy. In Australia, the rising price of gas, coupled with the falling cost of energy storage, has made renewable energy the least expensive source of reliable power generation. Reliable power generation means 24/7 here. And this is the falling cost of batteries is something that we are going to be talking about. I'm using an editorial "we" here, so I hope you don't mind that. We will be talking about a couple of times in the course of this program. The cost of battery storage has declined very remarkably in the last year or two. And in fact, Lazard Associates gave the cost for 2016 as averaging $470 per kilowatt hour. That sounds like a lot of money, I'm sure, to people who are paying 14 or 15 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. But it's not the cost of the electricity, it's the cost of the battery holding the electricity. And saying that a battery costs $470 per kilowatt hour is, well, the comparison is kind of like comparing the price of oil with the price of a truck that is used to deliver the oil. The thing that happened in 2016 was that the price of batteries went down tremendously. And in fact, where Bloomberg had talked about a price of, where Lazard had talked about a price of $470 per kilowatt hour, battery prices had reached 160 per kilowatt hour, about a third of the price they were talking about by the end of 2016. And the EOS battery, which comes from a company that's in Manhattan, is an example of a battery that has reached $160 per kilowatt hour, provided that you buy enough of them. You have to buy 40 batteries, and they would cost $160,000 each to get that. But you know, if you got a lot of money, that's okay. Our next item comes from the South China Morning Post. In Hawaii, the Kauai Island Utility Cooperative is now drawing energy from 272 Tesla power packs to provide electricity after dark. The Tesla power packs are expected to save KIUC 1.6 million gallons of diesel oil annually, cutting the cost of electricity from 15.5 cents per kilowatt hour to a price fixed at 13.9 cents per kilowatt hour for the next 20 years. Electricity prices are very problematical for islands because they typically are not big enough to have any resources of their own that could be used to produce electricity aside from renewable energy. And so Hawaii has historically been dependent on imported oil primarily for power consumption. And that imported oil is expensive, much more expensive than if you happen to be on the mainland. And so the prices of electricity in Hawaii are very high. The next item, this is still from Thursday, March 9th, is from the Daily Advertiser. A growing crisis in the Australian electricity market led to wholesale power prices more than doubling in a year, to at least twice what they were under the much maligned carbon price. The carbon price is kind of like a carbon tax. Analysis by the University of Melbourne's Climate and Energy College said it nearly tripled in coal-reliant Queensland and New South Wales. What I want to point out here is that the coal-dependent states in Australia have seen tripling, where the country as a whole has seen doubling, which means that those states that are heavily reliant on renewable resources have seen far lower price increases than the coal-reliant states. There's a huge political debate going on in Australia over the future of renewable power and coal, and it happens that the Australian federal government right now is being controlled by their Liberal Party in a coalition. The Liberal Party is not a Liberal Party by American standards. It's actually very kind of right-wing, and it is dependent on funding coming from coal companies, and to the point that they have actually tried to take money from renewable power and give it to the coal industry. We are up to Friday, March 10th, and there's a new picture here, which I'll bring up. This is from the gardenisland.com. The Hawaiian island of Kauai, same island we were just talking about, is now home to the largest integrated solar and battery facility in the world. The 52 megawatt hour Tesla Power Pack, which we just mentioned, plus Solar City Solar Farm is the first utility scale solar plus battery storage of its kind. It will bring Kauai Island utility cooperatives renewable power generation to more than 40% of its total power. This is a continuation of that earlier article that I read about. But this, by the way, is March 10th. If you want to find it. But basically, what it says is that they have solar plus battery storage, and one of the things that I've been working on in the last week has been an article for Green Energy Times, which does a somewhat rough analysis of the cost of renewable power, solar plus storage, possibly wind plus storage. And the conclusion that I draw is that we are almost at a point, where solar plus batteries is cheaper than nuclear power in the United States. We are at a point where solar plus battery storage is very, very much cheaper than gas-powered peaking plants, which supply the peak demand when it comes from gas. We are cheaper than, at a point where solar plus battery is very competitive with coal. And we are entering into a point, probably this year, where solar plus battery storage will be so inexpensive that really it will be not just competitive with natural gas, but clearly superior to it in terms of the price, because the price of solar power is not going to go up once it's installed. The price of natural gas can. So there are very good reasons to make that comparison with that in mind. The next item that I have here is from BBC News. And again, we're back to Australia. There's a lot going on in Australia. After a series of blackouts in South Australia, Elon Musk and Tesla can help solve the state's power crisis within 100 days. Asked on Twitter how serious he was about his offer, Mr. Musk responded, "Tesla will get the system installed and working 100 days from contract signature, or it is free. Is that serious enough for you?" That's a quote. And this, of course, is from BBC News. The thing that Elon Musk has done here is he has not said that they're going to solve South Australia's grid problems. He says that he's going to help solve them. What he is saying, however, is that if they give him $300 million in payment, he will provide them with $300 million worth of battery backup. And that will make a very big difference on the grid. Batteries, by the way, are almost instantaneous in terms of their supply of the demand that's required. And in that respect, they are better than natural gas peaking plants. So this is a serious offer, and it's clearly produced quite a lot of discussion in Australia, as we will see. And that discussion, by the way, will also be continued next week on this show, because some of it will happen in the news today and will not really appear in today's show. The show goes up to Wednesday. The next item is from VT Digger. Vermont state regulators have proposed new sound limits for wind turbines. Some renewable energy proponents say they would effectively ban most new wind turbines and may prevent the state from reaching its renewable energy goals. The rules say turbines could produce no more than 35 decibels at night, measured outside nearby homes. Now, Most people probably don't know what 35 decibels is, so perhaps I should explain that. I did an interview about a year and a half ago with a company in Maine called Pika Engineering. And Pika produces a small wind turbine which is intended to be used at a person's home, on a farm, or in some other place out in the countryside. The Pika wind turbine produces 38 decibels, 200 feet from the hub. And they describe 38 decibels as, which is louder than the 35 that is required by this rule, as being about as loud as a whisper in a library. But I think more to the point, and more clearly, you can more clearly understand what this level of sound is. When the Pika Research wind turbine was tested by the EPA to determine how loud it was for a certification that Pika wanted, the first test failed. And I'm not saying that the wind turbine failed the test. What I'm saying was the test itself failed. They could not test the sound from the wind turbine because they had too much extraneous sound, which was drowning out the wind turbine. The extraneous sound was coming from a field full of tall grass, which was blowing in the wind. And the sound that drowned out the wind turbine was the sound of the wind blowing through the grass in the field. They had to take down the wind turbine and then remount it. It's a very small wind turbine, so this is not a serious problem. They had to remount it in a place where there was no field of tall grass, or woods for that matter, so they could measure it, and it measured to 38 decibels. So what we're seeing here is that the people who are bringing this sound level to 35 decibels are bringing it below this point of the sound level that is produced by that field of tall grass in the wind. So it's easy to understand how renewable energy proponents would be concerned about this. The view is it would stop the installation of wind turbines in Vermont entirely, unless, of course, eminent domain is used to remove people from nearby housing. That is a possibility under certain circumstances. We are up to Saturday, March 11th, and we have an item from the Huffington Post. Climate change may be increasing the footprint of Lyme disease. Higher temperatures encourage the reproduction of mice, which are both natural reservoirs for the bacteria that cause Lyme disease and carriers of the ticks that spread the infection to human beings. People also spend more time outdoors, increasing exposure risks. When I was a kid, I lived across the river from here in Winchester, New Hampshire, and we ran through fields and woods and didn't have any, we never checked for ticks. There weren't any ticks. When my children were kids, 35 years ago, we started to see dog ticks appearing. Now we've got Lyme disease spreading into Vermont, which was not here 35, 40, 45 years ago, at least not in the levels that it is. And a lot of that is because of these ticks, which were not around. A lot of people don't understand that climate change does not happen uniformly, which means that it happens more in some places than in others, and it happens more at certain times of year than others. And the part of the year that increases, where the temperatures increase the most from climate change, is the coldest night of the winter. And you can see the difference in what has happened in Vermont by looking at the agricultural maps that are called planting zone maps, or more accurately, hardiness zone maps. A good source for these is the Arbor Day Foundation. And if you go to the Arbor Day Foundation online, you can see a map that shows how much the hardiness zones have changed in the last 35 years. Since 1990, the hardiness zones in Vermont, almost the entire state is in the next warmer zone than it was in 1990, which means that almost the entire state is about 10 degrees warmer, or to put it another way, the whole state is close to 10 degrees warmer than it was in 1990. And these mice and ticks can survive much better at the warmer temperatures than they did, which is why we have Lyme disease in Vermont that we didn't have. It's also related to the reason why avian malaria has been found in about 1 out of 6 loons at a lake that was studied in New Hampshire. It's also the reason why we're getting woolly adelgids, which are quite capable of stripping a large stand or even a forest of hemlocks, if it's the hemlock woolly adelgid, or other conifers, if it's the balsam woolly adelgid, stripping them absolutely bare so that the trees are killed altogether. And you can, if you go online and you look for, do a search for ghost forest and adelgid, A-D-E-L-G-I-D, you can see rolling hills in central Appalachia where all the trees are dead. And it's very sad to see that, but that's what's happening. It happens that every town in Windham County and in Bennington County has got hemlock woolly adelgids, and every county in Vermont has got balsam woolly adelgids, and all we're waiting for is a couple of good warm winters to have those just burgeon in the countryside into a serious pest that will destroy forests. So we've got a problem. Excuse me. The next item here is from Triple Pundit, and it is, sorry, trying to get a picture up. It is about analysis by the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. The Sierra Club's campaign backs up Michael Bloomberg's assertion that the United States will meet its climate commitments with or without Donald Trump. Coal retirements and new energy through 2025 will reduce U.S. carbon emissions by at least 437 million tons. That accounts for 60% of America's commitments under the Paris Agreement. What this is saying is that scheduled retirements will take us 60% of the way to the agreement. But the reason why we've got a picture here of Chicago, you know, I think when I lived near Chicago as a child, it didn't look like that. The reason there's a picture of Chicago is because Chicago is one of a large number of cities that are taking on climate change, climate action on their own. There are states too, California being the one that is the most clearly involved, but also New York and other states. And these cities, in addition to the coal closings for the coal burning power plants, these cities and states and some counties are picking up the slack on the climate change action. And Michael Bloomberg is claiming that the cities, the states, and the scheduled closures will just take us up to meet the Paris Accord agreements that we have said we would meet, which is important because if we don't meet them, then we're going to be facing problems in terms of trade and things of that nature. There have been a number of countries that said that they would be interested in having sanctions against the United States if we back out of those commitments. The next item is from the Houston Chronicle. An international energy conference held in Houston last week. At that conference, Trump officials disparaged climate science. Opposing them, the Saudi Arabian energy minister called on his colleagues to find ways to, quote, minimize the carbon footprint of fossil fuels. He was not alone. He was joined by the CEOs of ExxonMobil and Royal Dutch Shell. These are companies that want to minimize the carbon footprint of fossil fuels. I think the best known way that this is that they hope to do this is by what's called carbon capture and sequestration. And this is something that carbon capture is not that difficult. It's a fairly easy thing to capture carbon dioxide from the stacks of power plants. The problem is once you've got it, what do you do with it? And there are a bunch of ideas about that. One of those ideas is that it should be put into sequestered in places like mines or at the bottom of the sea, where the pressure of water above it will cause it to stay in liquid form. I'm very suspicious of that because I think, for example, a plastic bag at the bottom of the sea is very likely to leak, and that just means that you're putting off the inevitable of the carbon finding its way into the environment. On the other hand, there are ways of sequestering carbon, one of which is to use the carbon dioxide as a source fuel, feedstock for the manufacture of plastics, which ultimately wind up in the landfill where they are sequestered more or less permanently. There are other ways that carbon sequestration can be done. For example, it is possible to use the carbon dioxide in the manufacture of bricks, which do not require heat for manufacture. At least that's what I have been told. We are up to Sunday, March 12th. And the first item on this day comes from Power Engineering International. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development is to provide a financial injection aimed at developing the Greek renewable energy sector. EBRD is to provide 300 million euros, which is about $318 million, in funding for renewable energy projects in Greece, aimed at mobilizing investment and commercial financing. This photograph is obviously an extant hydro dam, which happens to be in Greece. Our next item is from the Sydney Morning Herald, and it is more on batteries. Tesla's Elon Musk may have put a large-scale battery storage on the national agenda with his offer to solve South Australia's power crisis for free if he did not deliver a large system within 100 days of signing a contract. Both the Prime Minister and South Australia's Premier are looking for more details in the offer. Elon Musk actually talked for about an hour with the Premier of South Australia, and then he had a conversation which he said both of these conversations went really well with the Prime Minister, and both of these conversations have already developed into proposals for energy storage in South Australia. One of them is a hydro project on the Snowy River, which is in South Australia and Victoria. The other is a offer to get bids on batteries from other companies. We are up to Monday, March 13th, and have another picture for you. This is a cover illustration for a book called Solutionary Rail, and the title of the article is How We Can Turn Railroads into a Climate Solution. This is an opinion piece. Railroads could drive the growth of clean energy. That is the aim of a new proposal to electrify railroads, put them on renewable energy, and use rail corridors as electricity superhighways to carry power from remote solar and wind installations to population centers. This article appeared in Grist, and it is a review of the book Solutionary Rail. Basically, and Tom Fennell, who co-hosts this show, has talked about the idea of using using the superhighways in the United States in much the same way. And in fact, highways are being used in much the same way already in places, notably Massachusetts, where it is not uncommon for some of the highways, people traveling down some of the highways, to see solar installations running along the highway on the land next to it. The idea here is, as you can see from the picture, having power lines running above the rail. There are reasons why it would be better to put the power lines underground, and those reasons are important enough that it might be worthwhile doing that. But nevertheless, you don't have to have big right-of-way disputes and taking people's farms or parts of them away by eminent domain in order to get these installations in. Eminent domain for a thing like a power line or a superhighway or a railroad can be a very serious problem. An uncle of mine owned a piece of property in Pennsylvania that was divided by a superhighway that went in, and it happened that almost all of his land was on the other side of the superhighway from his house. And things being what they are, he had to drive 7 miles to get to the land on the other side of the superhighway, which he, as a result, had practically no use for. Nevertheless, this is something that is a solution to a power question of how do you transmit power. Interestingly, there is a cost of transmission for electric power, and the question is coming into focus of whether the price of solar power plus the price of battery storage has not fallen to the point where it's approaching the cost of transmission, which means that these transmission lines are really might really be used in the future to stabilize the grid rather than to deliver power on a continuous basis to customers, with most customers getting power from local sources, or at least very close by sources that are solar or wind, and they put energy into batteries which deliver the power 24/7. The next item on the list here is from BBC News. We are still on Monday, March 13th, and it says, on Sunday afternoon, a private conversation between Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and Tesla boss Elon Musk caught Australia's attention. Well, we've been talking about that. The two spoke for almost an hour about energy and renewable resources and battery storage. Musk had offered to stop South Australia's electricity outages. As I had said, he also talked with the Premier of South Australia, and those talks have already, today being Thursday the 16th of March, they have already borne fruit in the governments of both the federal government and the state government of South Australia going to making announcements that they intended to do energy storage. The South Australian government is looking for battery storage. The federal government is looking for pumped hydro storage. They want to produce a very big pumped hydro system, which would take much longer and be much costlier to produce, but it would be much bigger. Anyway, we are up to Tuesday, March 14th, with an item from Clean Technica. In Chile's last power auction, Solar Reserve bid a world record low price at just 6.3 cents per kilowatt hour for dispatchable 24-hour solar power. The bid is for concentrated solar power, a form of solar using heat from the sun that can be stored thermally, and then the electricity is generated from that heat. It was made in an open auction for both fossil fuel energy and renewables, and it was made without any subsidy. Now, this 6.3 cents per kilowatt hour, we are getting well into the cost of power from natural gas, combined cycle natural gas plants, which is the form of energy that has been blamed for the rapid decline of the use of coal in the United States for generating electricity, and is very competitive. By very competitive, I mean it costs perhaps less than half as much as nuclear power. And this 24-hour solar power is the way that this is done is you heat up something, typically salt, for example, which has a low melting point, and when it gets hot enough, you put it into a storage container that is insulated with something, and then when you need the power, you run it into turbines. You run it into boilers, which are used to generate steam driving turbines. This is a thermal power plant, which is similar to, in the sense that it's a thermal plant, it is similar to natural gas, combined cycle plants, nuclear plants, and coal plants. But the price of this has gone down so much that it's getting cheaper than those. And this is the same kind of power, by the way, which has been installed at a few places in the United States, notably at Ivanpah in California. And that was that plant is a couple of years old, so it's much more expensive than this. But I think we're going to see these low-price power installations coming in the United States. The next item that we have is the one that I just clicked onto the screen a moment ago. It comes from Global Risk Insights, and the news release says short and medium-term projections indicate that the development of wind power is likely to take an increasingly important position in Mexico's energy landscape, particularly in light of growing uncertainty in the future natural gas imports from the United States. Gas had a 54% stake in the country's electricity production in 2015. And what's happened here is the people in Mexico have got very concerned about the attitude that the United States has toward them, as Donald Trump has been making his statements to the effect that there was going to be a wall to prevent Mexicans from getting into the United States, and the Mexicans were going to have to pay for it. They are not happy with Donald Trump. They are not happy with the United States, and in that not happiness, they're looking for a way of moving away from natural gas, which is being provided from the United States. There is a similar situation going on in Europe, where a number of European countries are looking for ways to reduce their dependence for natural gas on Russia, and which is interesting because it puts the Russians and companies in the United States, such as ExxonMobil and Chevron and various gas-producing companies, into a position of having a common interest. But what's happening here is that the Mexicans are starting to discover that they can put up wind turbines that will produce electricity much cheaper than what they had been doing. And by the way, wind turbines tend to produce their power when the sun is not shining, which means that wind and sun naturally kind of back each other up to a certain extent. If you have solar power on a grid, and Mexico has got lots of places for solar power, combined with wind power, and Mexico has lots of places for wind power, and then you put into that battery storage, you've got a combination in which the batteries that you need to have a secure power supply are much smaller than the batteries that you would need if you're doing solar by itself. Wind power in the United States, and I'm not sure what the prices are in Mexico, but wind power in the United States is already the lowest priced electric power we've got. And in 2016, it happened that the average price of solar power dropped below the average price of natural gas produced power from combined cycle natural gas plants. This is there was analysis done by Lazard Associates. If you go to the internet and you do a Google search on LCOE 10.0, or Lazard Associates Levelized Cost of Energy Analysis version 10.0, you can see a graph there pretty easily that shows you the relative costs of power. And it's very clear that utility scale solar power and wind power are the onshore wind power are the least expensive sources of electricity that we have in general among large resources, and they are starting to get extremely competitive. The issue, of course, of whether the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and people are always saying that those are issues with solar and wind that are very important. Those issues are becoming almost trivial in importance. And I want to point out, by the way, baseload power does not supply our peak demand. It supplies our minimum demand. That's why it's called baseload. When you have a nuclear plant, such as Vermont Yankee was, it supplies a minimum amount of electricity. In the case of Vermont Yankee, when it first came online, that was 540 megawatts. The peak demand that came up had to be supplied by something else, which is why there are peaking plants, natural gas peaking plants. And the electricity for peak demand costs a great deal more to generate than the electricity from baseload power plants. What has happened is that the demand curves have really kind of been changed radically by solar power, which comes on during the highest demand periods. So solar power is producing power at the very point of the day when it's in greatest need. Wind power produces it at night, and what has happened as a result of that is that in the spot market, which is the wholesale market for electricity that is needed quickly, the spot market in some parts of the United States has gone to zero in peak demand periods. This is a serious problem for the utilities. It's a serious problem for the coal producers in particular. It is not a serious problem for customers. The utilities can develop business models, and a number of utilities have done that, developed business models that take this into account, and they can move ahead and get their profit anyway. Some utilities have resisted developing new business models, and they are suffering as a result of that. And what they're suffering from, sorry, I'm looking I'm doing my own engineering today, so I have to I have to look at these screens that are off in the distance. Utilities that have resisted this are running into trouble, and there have been big losses. E.ON, for example, which is a European utility that spun off its gas and coal generating facilities, has taken a big hit, many billions of dollars. Toshiba is taking a big hit from Westinghouse because of problems with building the latest generation of nuclear reactors. Again, billions of dollars. This is a problem that is something that has to be addressed by the utilities. Okay, the next item is from Yahoo 7 News. South Australia will build Australia's largest battery. We're back to that story again. To store renewable energy along with a new 250 megawatt gas-powered power plant. South Australia's premier announced the government's plan to build, own, and operate the plant. He said it was part of a plan to spend $550 million to take control of the state energy market. Now, the federal government, which is very much in favor of coal in Australia, was very upset about this because they want to control the market that South Australia is trying to take control of. They came up with an alternative to this, as I mentioned earlier. But this is a story that has been unfolding over a period of days. It will continue to unfold probably in coming weeks, possibly in coming months or even years. This was from Yahoo 7 News, by the way. So we are up to Wednesday, March 15th, and we have a, sorry about that, we have an item from Green Tech Media, and this is, I've got it listed as an opinion piece with a title, Trump's Business Council is a who's who of renewable energy investors and climate champions. That's the title. If Donald Trump asked the executive sitting on his Business Advisory Council for energy policy advice, what kind of answer would he get? Judging by what their actions are, they would probably tell him to emphasize the clean stuff. This is an interesting article. It might be worthwhile for anybody who's really, and by the way, the reason that picture is there, that's a council. The picture was supplied with the article, so I simply reproduced it here. This is Wednesday, March 15th. It's worthwhile looking into this because it lists a number of the companies that are involved in that council, Donald Trump's council. And it talks about what those companies have done, what they are doing, the amounts of money they're spending, and so forth. And they include companies like Microsoft, Apple, General Motors, Ford. They include a lot of companies. And it turns out that if you look at them, they are spending billions of dollars on renewable power. And this is not just renewable power, but also on efficiency and other ways of being clean, other environmental issues. And they really kind of fly in the face of what the administration is expecting in terms of the future. The administration in the United States seems to be very much in favor of coal, very much in favor of oil and natural gas. And the coal industry is not just in trouble. The coal industry has basically fallen into a situation where it has gone into a depression, the likes of which can, really in order to understand it, you have to think in terms of manual typewriters. The computer came along, the manual typewriter disappeared. There were a number of things that have disappeared. You walk down the street and ask people, do you watch television? The people who say yes usually talk about cable television. The people who say no, it turns out that if you press them, you can find out that they do watch television, but they don't watch it on a television, they watch it on a computer. BCTV, for example, is broadcast by cable. It's also, the shows on it are also available online, either at the BCTV website or on YouTube. And there is an enormous amount of material that's just available for free. Well, we're in a position where computers destroyed manual typewriters, put them out of business. The calculating machines put slide rules out of business and mechanical adding machines. When I was a kid, it was slide rules and mechanical adding machines. Vermont Yankee was designed using slide rules and mechanical adding machines. They didn't have the big computers at the time, at least not available to most design teams. The companies that are being promoted by the Trump administration are companies that are being challenged by market forces that are beyond their control. And I don't think Donald Trump or his administration is going to be able to save oil and natural gas, let alone coal, because the prices of renewable power are going down. The oil and natural gas industry is not just losing market share, it's losing market share in a market that is contracting, and it is losing customers not necessarily to a competition, but to technology that allows those customers to generate their own power. Same thing is starting to happen with cars. The same thing is happening with home heating. It's not a pretty picture, and I don't think Donald Trump can have any effect on it at all. And we'll see in the future what will happen when Mitch McConnell, who's big in the Senate, discovers that Donald Trump cannot make good on his promise to get coal miners their jobs back. The next item is from Deutsche Welle. E.ON, Germany's second largest energy company, unveiled a loss of 16 billion euros, which is about $17 billion, in 2016, hit by a massive charge to the tune of 11 billion euros on its new subsidiary, Uniper. Uniper combines E.ON's former coal and gas power plants, which were spun off in 2015, to separate them from the company's healthier units. E.ON saw the changes coming. They wanted to get rid of their coal and gas power plants. E.ON is a utility. Unfortunately, they didn't sell enough shares of Uniper to protect themselves. My guess is that most potential buyers, really weren't interested in buying. The next item is from Pacific Standard. It says, in unpublished written testimony to the Armed Forces Committee, Secretary of Defense James Mattis called climate change a security threat for which the United States military leaders need to prepare. This according to a report in ProPublica. He wrote, quote, "Climate change is impacting stability in areas of the world where our troops are operating today," end quote. This is not surprising, I think, to people who follow the Pentagon and its positions on climate change through the years. We've got problems with, for example, naval installations, because a minor change in sea level has made it clear that within a very short period of time, they will not be able to use equipment on their bases, because the highest tides will be higher than what they had been accustomed to in the past. This is more of the same thing. The climate change is impacting stability in the world. It's also impacting a variety of other places, the naval bases being one, but also the renewable power that can be used to address climate change can also be used to address the problem of supplying power to troops in the field, meaning that we do not have to transport oil to troops in the field. We can give them solar panels and batteries, and that in turn means that we don't have we have a very much reduced risk of loss in convoys crossing land in places like Afghanistan. That article was in the Pacific Standard. And our last article of the day is an item from the Yorkshire Post. This is a weir in Yorkshire, and I will explain what that is. The swift-flowing Yorkshire rivers and streams could help keep lights shining for generations. One Yorkshire hydroelectric power plant is providing electricity for hundreds of homes. As part of the scheme, a fish pass has been built that should allow the return of salmon stocks for the first time since the First World War. The definition of what a weir is a little bit unclear. But a widely used definition is that it is an obstruction in a river that is not complete enough to prevent fish from traveling in both directions. This independent of, for example, a fish ladder. There are weirs where the fish they look like dams, but the fish can simply swim over them because the water comes over the top of the dam, as it does in this picture, though I doubt that fish are swimming up that area on the left. There are other parts of the weir in which the fish can swim. And this actually has a great deal of significance in the United States for a couple of reasons. You can see the effect of it when you consider that in the state of Vermont we have the potential for something on the order of 250 megawatts of hydropower, an amount of electricity that's approximately equal to what the state of Vermont was buying from the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant. But that potential does not require the construction of new dams. And the dams that are there that would have to be altered to produce that power are not going to be removed. They are there for a reason that has nothing to do with power generation. They were put in to prevent flooding in places like Springfield, Massachusetts, and Hartford, Connecticut. And these flood control dams are all over the watershed for the Connecticut River. If you go down to Springfield and you kind of poke around at street level for a while, you'll see that the interstate highways going through Springfield are actually part of a series of dikes that can be used by blocking the underpasses to prevent water from getting from the river to the main body of the city. These power generating stations, the small power generating stations, can be operated in ways that do almost no damage whatever to fish, and they do not prevent fish and so forth from passing in both directions. So this is a solution to power generation that might be appropriate to our state. We are at the end of the show, so I will say goodbye on behalf of myself and the absent Tom Fennell, who I hope will be back next week. It's much more fun when he's here. So I will hope to see you then. And until then, have a lovely week.
We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth, leaving little behind, but we will grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.